This is Fam Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Leigh-Ann Larson. And I want to welcome you to the Fam Electric Ghost podcast. How you doing tonight or today?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you so much for having me on.
So we're going to talk about a couple of things, but one of the topics is energy healing for grief and how spirit and science can unite to heal the heart. And we do have your link here to your retreat, the Grief Space Retreat, and that'll be fully clickable, so you don't have to remember that in the podcast description. Right now, we're live on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. We'll be on all the other podcast platforms in the podcast description. That URL will be clickable. But a couple of things we always ask before we get into the heart of your story, we always ask any guest, like, what motivates you and why do you do what you do?
Oh, fabulous questions. Love them. You know, what really motivates me is to help people understand who they really are as humans so that they can live their best possible life. Humanity has no idea, really, big picture, no idea how flippin' amazing we are and how much access we have to what historically has been supernatural abilities, skills, talents. And this world is so tough, so tough. We need to let people know how they can access all of the inherent gifts that every single human has to overcome challenges and not only to survive, but to thrive in this world.
I'm a big believer because I think in creativity, right? I think it's the secret sauce of every human being. But a lot of people don't give themselves permission, or they feel like, well, I have to be Shakespeare to be a writer. I've got to be Orson Welles to be a director. I've got to be Miles Davis to be a musician. Like they look at like the top tier people and then they say, well, I can't match that. And so they don't even try. And I find that like creativity is like every day you're creative, whether that you think you're a writer or not. Every day you figure out how to turn a phrase, communicate with people around you. You know, you tell stories all day. If you're a human being, you're telling a story somewhere. And it's just the right, creative people, we kind of access our vulnerability and we use it in a cathartic way to like let the muse channel through us, and we pull what's out there and what's inside of us and do something that's relatable. I believe everybody can do that, but people don't feel they can.
Yes, 100%. I mean, I truly believe that it's not that we just have life. We are actually expressions of life. And we are co-creators on this journey of life. When we are creating, I actually believe that's as close as we possibly can be to our own inherent divine nature. 100%. And creativity is where that's foundational to understanding who we actually are. 100%.
Yeah. I believe, that's like, I started this podcast back in 2016 to talk to emerging and independent artists I didn't think were getting a voice. And then I said, well, you know what? It isn't just for songwriters. Everybody's creative. And I expanded it to like, life coaches, writers, business people, anybody that has something to say, that has a vision or story. And then people told me that, well, you got to narrow the focus. I said, well, it's humanity. You're like, why do I have to narrow the focus? Like if I can weave the thread and show the commonalities, I can get it done. So that's what I try to do. And it's interesting because I think there's a merging of like science and art and spiritualism in the body. Is like it's expansive. Like and people like to be in little narrow lanes in boxes, and I try to like get rid of the box.
Right? Out of the box. 100%. Well, honestly, like the intersection of, the mind, the body, and the spirit is really the kind of whole person, isn't it? It's that
Mhm.
holistic view. We are not one dimensional, stagnant beings. And to miss any aspect of a personhood, I think you're missing a big important piece of the puzzle, whichever
Yeah,
aspect.
yeah, because science and art, like, during the, like, then, I think the Renaissance period, like Renaissance people, or could I call it Renaissance man, but I say Renaissance people, there was,
Mhm.
there's spiritualism, art, science, just like merging
Mhm.
of the fact that you could be, that connected to like art and science and spirit and questions about humanity. Like,
Mhm.
I'm always getting to the Victorian poets and the idea of the looking glass self. Right, you find it like find it in all Longfellow and Wordsworth and Blake and like Lord Byron.
Mhm.
It's like they're all getting into this thing where they're diving into themselves and trying to explain humanity.
Mhm.
And people today they don't understand, like, art isn't like an afterthought. It's part of us. Art is integral to human
Yes.
connection and development. And
Mhm.
people just want to, like, oh, it's this STEM. Now, I understand it's important, but you've got
Mhm.
to consider like all the pillars of humanity.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that you actually said these artists are going within, they're going within to pull out and bring forth into the world the art. I think that's why I honed in on the grief, because there's nothing that pulls you within like the traumatic loss, that a death of a loved one or a major upheaval in your life causes. It
Yeah,
forces
crisis.
us to go in. And it is from within, it is from that place that actually your artists are creating. We as humanity, sometimes are on our face, on the floor, having to do that deep dive to figure out what are we doing here anyways, and what is this all about, and how do I now make meaning in my life, right? And I think a lot of artists try to make meaning in their life with their art.
Yeah, it's not just the happy moments. Like, a lot of times,
Mhm.
like the greatest singer songwriters are talking about the depth of the tragedies in their life, and it's relatable.
Mhm.
You think about James Taylor. I've been seeing fire, I seen rain.
Mhm. Or
He was going
Taylor
through.
and all her breakups.
Yeah, it's like, well, it's that pain. It's like artists take the art is like a cathartic exercise of going through the ups and downs, the chaotic moments in life, and making it relatable.
Mhm.
And then by processing that pain or the shame or the fear into some piece of art, whether you're an actor that does it on stage
Mhm.
or a painter on the canvas or a songwriter or even an inventor who creates something, is like they're taking that energy and that drive and the passion and putting something out into the world that
Mhm.
everybody can experience. And it comes from hard work
Mhm.
of actually connecting the dots. And
Right.
it seems to me it's like people don't connect it, like what you see and what you can't see and what you feel, what you don't feel. It's that spiritual aspect of things that I think you have to go beyond what you can actually see or hear, get to what you feel.
Mhm. Oh, yes. Have you ever had a spiritual or mystical experience where you then attempted to share that with another person and it just falls flat? You just don't have the words for it?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
that's why being a musician would, like, we can go into sound. Like, the one thing I love
Mhm.
about music is music has a way of, like, I'm not, I can sing, but I'm a pianist, a composer,
Mhm.
player, and
Wonderful.
notes, frequencies, you know,
Sound
like,
healing.
it's
Love
the
sound.
idea is, yeah, sound is like, if anybody listens to music, it's like you can see what happens to people. It calls up images. It calls up
Mhm.
moments. Everybody
Mhm.
experiences those tones and those frequencies and the beats. because it's like it resonates. There's some like, universal tones or keys that trigger things.
Oh, yes. The crystal bowls, that the sets of the crystal bowls are all lined up with notes that harmonize with the chakras of the body. And you can have a beautiful sound healing experience with your energy body, which I'm sure we'll talk about, based on what is being played, what frequency is being played on the crystal bowls. And of course, many other things. One of my favorite discoveries is brain.fm. I'll give them a little plug. Are you aware of who they are? Brain FM?
I think I heard of it, but you can talk more about it.
Yeah, it's an app. And what you can do is you could put on a timer on, and it will play music for you based on the work that you want to do, whether it's creative work, a deep dive, or a relaxation. And it works with your brain frequencies to put you in that sweet spot for whatever it is that you have going on. And it is wonderful. And you can do the timer to chunk your times that you're in that work, and then you come out. It's just game changer. Wonderful.
I think a lot of people maybe do that without realizing they're doing that.
Sure. These Brain FM, no lyrics. So it's all just, you can do keys, synth, sound, whatever.
Yeah. Some people just like to have the kind of atmospheric stuff in the background, or, just something they just, that by nature recordings or something like, or even like when you go to sleep, people, they use the sound boxes to hear the ocean or birds or the forest or nature recordings, but atmospheric, like no lyrics, just like tones.
Exactly.
Kind of get people in a mode where they're, I've talked to a lot of writers that like to have music in the background while they're writing.
Yes. And there's plenty of neuroscience research out there that backs this up, that, you have brain chemistry that you can manipulate with sound to support what it is that you're looking to accomplish in terms of tasks in the moment.
So in terms of being a spirit medium and your transition from being a Reiki master and psychotherapist, maybe you want to talk about that journey and the different phases of what you've gone through and where you are now.
Wonderful. I'd be happy to do that. So I think that the starting point for me really was when I was in my late 20s. I had 3 small children. I married my high school sweetheart, so we had kids right away. So I was done and dusted by 27. I had 3 kids. And what happened was I was an at-home mom, and I was struggling with some postpartum. And so I was, doing the therapy thing. I also got into Reiki and energy healing. And what I realized was, in my own healing experience, I really felt there was value in doing therapy. So I was a Reiki master teacher. I was a mother of 3 small children. And I went to college part-time at night for 12 years, if you can imagine, while I was raising the kids. And then when I became a Reiki master teacher, what happened was my mom died. I was 30 and my mom died. And that was a lot. And so I'm doing the energy work, and I'm doing, part-time college classes, got the kids. And I realized, because of doing the Reiki with groups of other people, I would do a monthly practitioners group and every other week healing circles for people. I was a medium. Like, I fell into it. Like, I was seeing things, I was hearing things, I was knowing things. So I'm going to college and I'm doing this stuff. And I was very resistant. I was like, no. I am not getting involved in that. Then my mom died suddenly. And I actually went to a medium. This is back when John Edwards was brandy new on TV. Remember John Edwards? So he's still around. And I was watching him on TV one night, and that almost like, so so I went to a medium and I got a message, which was powerful. Then I saw him on television and I thought, you know what? Like, I guess this is legitimate and I guess it's okay that I do this. So then I became, so I sat in circles, I learned, I developed, and I was a working medium for about 7 years, had a little Reiki business while I was in grad school doing the things, you know. I'm a very high productive person, I'm a high producer. So I've always been super busy in my life. And went through the college, got the bachelor's, got the master's, did my practicum, did my internship, all this while doing the side stuff with the readings and Reiki and all that. And then I got to a point where I said, you know what, I really want to focus on being a therapist. Like I love doing the mediumship. I don't want to say there's no value in that. There is, and it's helpful. I believe everyone can do it. It's like ET calling home. But I didn't have that feeling like I was helping people because they come in for a reading. If they're a frequent flyer, they might come in, a few times a year or whatever, right? But it's not like a nice therapeutic relationship like therapy. So I decided to just focus on the therapy. And I did have 3 kids, so I couldn't do everything. So I got into the therapy. I worked for 7 years in community mental health. And then a couple of those years, I also was doing a group private practice with someone else's practice. And then I eventually left community mental health, just did private practice for 5 years in someone else's group, left that group and became a solo therapist. I was solo for a year, a little longer. I was lonely. All I was doing was talking to clients. I had a peer group that I was talking to, but honestly, we were so starved for relationship that we didn't even talk about clients. We were just like, oh my gosh, another professional. It wasn't good. I did not like working on my own in this field. So I decided to start a group practice. That was in 2015. This is our 10th year. Elevate Counseling Services. We're in Massachusetts. If anyone is in Massachusetts looking for a therapist, look us up, Elevate Counseling Services. And what happened was I just wanted a few friends to do therapy with. I didn't think it was going to turn into, I think right now we have 52 employees. We have 6 brick and mortar locations. We have a telehealth division, a professional development training center. One of my therapists hosts a podcast for us called Mindful Elevation. We are like doing some big moves, super exciting. So that I was focusing on that about 12 years in. 3 years ago, my dad died. Now he was 90, but he had been without my mom for about 25 years. I was his person kind of thing. And he was around when I was doing mediumship, because when I first started doing mediumship after my mom died, blah, 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 blah. So he knew about it. He also knew it faded out and I hadn't done it for a long time, but he deceased. And it was maybe days, if that, after his funeral. I'm sitting in this very room and he's like, I know that I'm here and we need to talk. So I had also gotten certified as a grief educator during the pandemic. And I was working with a lot of clients who had deceased loved ones from the pandemic, or it might not have been COVID, but they might have had an illness that they couldn't get treatment for because all the hospitals were overloaded. So when I became a grief educator and I was really sitting in a lot of grief with clients, the mediumship sort of came back on too. So it's, all the things. So a few years ago, I started working with the mediumship again. And I'm usually in at least one circle a week, if not 2, working on my skills, honing them and all that. To be honest with you, after 15 years of doing therapy with people, the ability to communicate with our energy bodies of our loved ones who have gone on is so much better. And I think it just has to do with just getting used to just communicating,
Yeah.
right? With another being. So, one of the things I also understand about it now is thanks to Joe Dispenza. Do you know who he is? Wonderful human. Wonderful human. He's got a great book, Becoming Supernatural. I highly recommend it. He really did a lot of research to help us understand that we are energy, we are frequency, we are vibration, and you can't put energy out. I have a newsletter. You can sign up for my email if you want and get on the newsletter. It's called Energy and Eternity, because you cannot put energy out. That is our spirit. That is our soul. And it is that energy that we are communicating with when we're doing spirit communication. So I put the two together. I am a member of the Association for Comprehensive Energy Psychology. I've been with them since I think 2002, maybe. Hypnosis since 2000. I mean, I've been in both worlds and just sort of pushed the energy off to the side for a while. But now that Elevate's doing great, they barely need me. I'm there to be the cheerleader, see some clients, and do some business development, but they are an incredible team. It's really freed me up to be able to pursue my passion, which is truly helping people understand, who they are. And in the grief work, what I have found is I can utilize my EMDR talents, eye movement desensitization reprocessing. It's that thing like this with the light bar. So Dr. Oh my goodness, his name is escaping me right now, which is embarrassing. I'll remember it. But a psychologist who was working with veterans discovered that when you do EMDR around sadness over someone passing, that the individual can really heal a lot of that sadness and have a personal experience of their loved one. It's called an induced after death communication, IADC. And it's unbelievable to see the healing that happens. As a spirit medium, I can unequivocally tell you what is happening is my clients who are doing IADC are actually having an experience just like a medium would if they were to go see a medium, except they know their loved one. They know exactly who it is. They see them, they hear them, they'll get a message, they'll get a feeling, this is the mind-blowing part, a new experience of them. It's not a memory. It's like a new thing.
New connection.
And it is, and as much as I love doing mediumship for people, it is so much more healing when the individual taps into their own ability to connect with their loved one. And then from there, I work with them on how do you keep that relationship going? How do you foster communication? How do you allow yourself to feel them in your heart in a tangible way that helps you heal your grief? And enter the Grief Space Retreat, right? Which is, we do all that work there and more. And we have a lot of fun because it's in a beautiful sky forest in Costa Rica. It's just absolutely gorgeous.
Well, you're giving people the permission to kind of go beyond maybe some Western constraints where people would, they just don't believe in the spirit world. I'm part Cherokee, Blackfoot Indian, and the relationship with Native Indigenous peoples and Native Americans is like there's this connection with the spirit, with your ancestors.
Yes,
it's always there. It's like it's always like it's not thought of as being a foo-foo thing. It's like it's there. It's real. Right?
You know what's cool though? You know what's really cool? I actually don't even think you need to believe that anymore. I think you just have to believe in science. And then you just have to be willing to do the footwork of doing the research, because it's all out there for us. It is all there. It is laid out in black and white. It is our research capabilities. And also we've got some great technical writers now who know how to put the research in layman's terms so people can understand it I'm telling you, I don't even think you need that mustard seed of faith anymore. All you need is to believe in science. Oh, so I love this. I believe that science is God's religion.
But
How
it
fun
makes,
is that?
but there's a lot of synergy between science and the mysticism and
Oh, yeah.
faith. With the universe has got a lot of things that science can't explain, but
Mhm.
science is attempting to explain. And
Right. Oh, they are trying so hard. Our quantum physicists, I love them. I love our quantum physicists because they're baffled beyond measure. And you know what? Also, they're really going on the edge and they're taking risks and they're willing to say, oh, what we thought we knew was wrong.
yeah, but that's the
And,
thing about science. Like you learn like that your laws and your rules can change. That you can
mhm,
have these like foundational, like the canon can shift. Like
yes.
people get stuck in the canon and they say, well, this is it.
Yeah.
This is X is X. It's like, well, maybe it's X is Y. And,
Mhm.
and, and things can invert and revert. And you find all kinds of like you want things that if people want things to be like, it's yes, no, it's one and zero. I'm a software designer. I'm in computers.
Oh, okay.
I do a lot of design work. And
Mhm.
now that we're in this kind of AI world, where it used to be is like everything was like ones and zeros, yes and no, black and white. Now we're getting into these algorithms where things are getting gray. That we're
Mhm.
starting to see we're putting a little bit of human spark into our machines,
Yeah, for sure.
and we're starting to be able to have machines understand language.
Mhm.
Understand how to hear humans not just as ones and zeros, but in the language we actually speak.
Yes.
And it's actually creating outcomes that we never expected.
Mhm.
And it's not fully sentient. It's not there yet.
Mhm.
It's not like, but we're on the road to eventually figuring that out. And
Oh, yes. There's wild things that are ahead for us
yeah,
in
it's just the
humanity.
connection because electricity. We're like electric machines in ourselves, like
Yeah.
biochemical machines.
We are. We are. Yes. Yep, for sure. And it's so interesting because the energy psychology work, for instance, emotional freedom technique relies on tapping on the meridians in the body to get the energy flowing because we've been able to now research. Researchers put dye in a body, and watched it travel. Every single mammal has meridians in their body. The folks who've been practicing acupuncture knew this a long time ago before it was
Figured it
researched.
out.
But, there's evidence that meridians that get backed up can cause cancer, or, if the flow gets cut off, it can cause problems around mood dysregulation. There are meridians associated with headaches, anxiety, right? And with just tapping through these things and repeating positive statements to yourself or allowing and accepting your limitations as not shameful, but
Yeah,
just part of your humanity. Healing. We're healing the body through brain chemistry and manipulating the meridians or utilizing eye movement to take trauma focused memories, move them over to the part of the brain that has more executive functioning to release the wash of adrenaline and cortisol that literally paralyzes people or gives them panic attacks
yeah,
or
fear.
flashbacks
Yeah,
or
all this fear is like the wolf
yeah,
at the door. Because a lot of times, like if we get into Eastern philosophy, I'm a Buddhist, but
yeah.
there's a lot, power in chanting and breathing, and
Mhm.
also into mindset and
Mhm.
reprogramming your mindset. Like
Oh,
having,
100%.
yeah, when
Mhm.
if I lived in Japan for like 2 years, and I practiced like Nichiren Daishonin Buddhism, and the whole idea is like your mindset, you can totally control and change a lot of what's going on in your body and your heart and your soul and your spirit and the physical and the
Mhm.
mental, it's all and spiritual, it's all interconnected.
Yes,
And when
100.
you learn that, like, your brain is so powerful, you have so much untapped capacity.
Mhm.
And when you if you live in negativity, the negative things kind of come to you, radiate frequencies, and you
Mhm.
get what it's karmic. It's like you get what you
Right.
put in. The law of attraction. If you're
Yes, well,
prickly, you get
mhm,
prickly things happen. If
right.
you're more positive outcome, then positive things start to happen. And you can not
Mhm.
that you want to just say, well, everything's blue sky. Not that, not everything's blue sky. You deal with reality. But you
Mhm.
can still navigate to know how to deal with the ups and downs. You know how
Right.
to respond, you know how to
Mhm.
control your anxiety, breathing exercises and control to kind of tap down the fear response, the wolf at the door response, like the cortisol response you're talking about. Like, you can
Mhm.
control your reaction so you don't end up being that person that's like rage, road rage. Like,
Right.
you don't get
Right.
that like tamped up frustration that blows up because you don't know, you're not dealing with the looking glass self. You're not analyzing your situation. You're not figuring out how to have lessons learned and
Mhm.
and and training. Like every athlete we train, every musician we train. But if you
Mhm.
don't train your brain and your spirit and your soul, because you don't
Right,
practice,
then what happens? What
what
happens?
happens? You get
Yeah,
out of control.
yeah. You're saying so many important things, I feel like. You talked about if you ruminate on the negative, you're going to bring more negative. In psychology, we say if you are looking for the problem, you're going to find all the problems. And if you're looking for the solution, you're going to find all the solutions. If you're looking for things to be afraid of, you will live a fear based life. And if you are looking for things to be grateful for, you will be full of gratitude. Whatever you are scanning the environment for, you are going to find because it all exists here. And that's part of being a co creator of your life. You get to choose what you're going to hone in on. So that was super important. And then you talked about the road rage. And I just have to talk to you about this because I've worked with a lot of people who struggle with this. I like to think of every car, right? Every individual, every however many people are in the car, that's like a whole little world unto itself. That car represents a whole nother planet, a whole nother, you know, experience of life that I'm not privy to. I don't live on that planet. I don't belong on that planet. That planet is none of my business. So if they are honking at me, or if they are passing me, or they're super slow and pokey, whatever they're doing, it's not about me. They're having their experience. Maybe they're rushing to the hospital because there's someone very ill, or maybe their wife is about to have a baby next to them in the car, or maybe someone just passed and they're just so sad and slow and lethargic in their car. We don't know what's going on with people. So I love to really encourage people to, tell yourself a story about that person and make it a goodwill story. Make it a story that's not that they're a jerk, but that they're a human and they're struggling with something, or something's going on with them that you don't know about, and just send them a little light, a little love, a little blessing. It's never about us. And that trips people up. When people internalize other people's stuff, I'm telling you right now, we are all sovereign beings and we
Mhm.
all get to choose. We are the protagonists of our own stories. Let's celebrate that and stop complaining about how other people are choosing to live their lives, and instead take that energy and live your best life.
Yeah, just
Right?
having the perspective. If you're trying to control other people, you're probably, you're gonna have a fight.
You are
You're
up
gonna
the creek without a paddle, my
you're gonna
friend.
be in a fight all the time, and it's like you want to be into that top-down control structure. Like,
Yeah,
and I think some people they want to control the other. But
right.
if you can't even control yourself, how you can control somebody else, right? So it's like you
Mhm.
gotta start thinking. I was like, why do you need to do that? You're like, why are
Yeah.
you trying to like? What does that have to do with you? Like you're on your
Mhm.
journey. It's like what is yeah, what the Joneses do. What is that? Why is that your business, right?
Right.
So the
Yeah.
problem is people get caught up and they think, well, what they're doing is affecting me. It's like, well, you're the captain of your ship. Well,
Mhm.
they're the captain of their ship, but what does that have to do with you? So, like, a lot of
Right.
times, it's like community is hard to deal with when you have this individualism to a certain extent, and
Yeah.
then you have that kind of blame game.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
people say, "Well, how are you supposed to read it?" It's like start to learn how to read life in a better
Mm.
way. Because I think maybe people were being programmed or taught to read things in a way that's not advantageous to their success.
Right. Yes. Yes. Though cognitive distortions is something that every therapist works with their staff and themselves as well, of course, and their clients, because people mind read, or people bring their stuff with them and catastrophize, or they project negativity. It's normal. It happened in childhood. That's when people got these cognitive meaning makings or schemas to get through in the world. Because little Johnny doesn't think to come home and go, now, mom, this person said this to me and it made me feel like this. So what I did was I told myself this story. And so now I'm going to apply this story in all situations when I feel this way, right?
Mhm.
I should have noticed Johnny was in a bad mood. So now he starts reading the room for every single person and he starts controlling people for the rest of his life because when he was 4 years old on the playground, that happened, you know?
Mhm.
So we have to undo a lot of these distortions as we get older so that we can really navigate relationships and understand that a lot of the things that we did that worked well, maybe you lived in a home with an alcoholic parent and you knew that you needed to read the room before you knew what your day was going to be like or your evening was going to be like. But at some point, those distortions will get in the way, and you have to really understand how to unpack them. So important.
Yeah, navigating loss is hard, because some people, like, if you can't move forward, like some people, like they're just caught in the kind of resentments of the past,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
we can't. We seem to be in a world where the resentments keep on adding up, and people are like, they're
Mm-hmm.
coming up with a bill with an invoice of all their resentments, and they're
Yeah.
saying, "Well, you have to pay it."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Here's my list, here's my invoice, and now you have to pay it.
Yeah.
And that's the way they're it's like this transactional behavior.
Mm-hmm.
They so if you have this transactional kind of mindset, it's like, well,
Yes.
you're always gonna be building up that invoice and waiting
Mm-hmm.
for the payday.
Yeah, for sure. I sort of have a theory around that. You know, people who go into the past and get resentments or have a lot of regret, we call that regret orientation, or who go into the future and try to control and mind read. I actually believe that this is a form of addiction and
Mhm.
it's thinking addiction. You see, the best way to be, Buddhist over there, to be in the moment is the best place to be. It is life. Where life is happening is right now. And I think when right now is uncomfortable, whether it's boring or it's challenging or it's painful or whatever, it's not living up to expectations, a person might go into the past, think. That's all brain chemistry. That is brain chemistry. Resentments are brain chemistry. Regret, remorse, shame, low self-esteem, brain chemistry. It's all firing off chemistry that you get addicted to. Or you go into the future, anxiety, panic, worry, frustration, control issues, different set of brain chemistry, all your brain gets used to that pattern. And so one of the gifts of meditation is to help a person learn how to crave staying in the moment.
Yeah, the moment, I've always been kind of in the moment. My type of music I like to do is as an artist, as a musician, is kind of free form fusion, or experimental, that's in the moment. And the idea in this type of music is like there's no bad note, there's an opportunity. Right. So when you're in that kind of group of musicians, if somebody hits a note that's unexpected, people just go with it.
Yeah.
And the song evolves. And we're not like classical musicians reading Bach.
Right.
We're willing, like we might have a form, we might have a structure, but the structure can evolve or devolve. So we can go with, we can do something harmonious, or we can go do something dissonant. Or we can have discordance, we can have noise, we can have, things that are a little off key, off time, polyrhythms, all kinds of things happening that might seem confusing. But it kind of is basically, we're feeling the room, we're feeling each other, a lot of nonverbal communication. And it feels very satisfying because like this is like what is going on, and we're not caring about what happened yesterday or what's happening tomorrow. We're in the next bar. Yeah. We're into like what's happening right now.
So fun. Little riff jazz. Yeah.
I find it's like that riffing, where they're kind of being able to have happy accidents and not be upset or sad about it or think you made a mistake.
Right.
It's very satisfying when you're in that kind of moment where we have this kind of perfectionism today. I run into kids, like I'm a producer, and you get these people, I run into other musicians, and they're like overdoing it, like 100 takes. And I'm like, why do you, like, don't you know, it's like part of what art is the imperfections of it. So it could take 3 or 4 has these imperfections, but it was in the moment. It's really what you were trying to do. If I take 100, you've gotten away from what your original intent is. And now you're trying to rewrite what you wrote, and you're kind of destroying it. And as a producer, I gotta say, don't destroy the work.
Right. Color outside the lines. Color outside the lines.
Yeah, be willing to deal with the fact that it was what it was, and then move on to the next piece instead of trying to kind of rearrange that piece.
Yeah. It's so interesting because, I'm thinking about grief and how that really is what happens to us, right? But when we have a loss, we hit a note, all right. And it's an unexpected note, all right. And it's an unhappy note too, because literally it has changed the whole jam. Changed the whole jam. Especially how close you are to your person. And so the grief work is very closely tied into this, staying in the moment, being in the moment. You cannot outrun your grief. You cannot do that. I need a sip of water. And I think a lot of this work and the creative part is so important in grief. The meditation is so important in grief. The tapping, the grief space, creating space for it. I think doing some fusion music would be an awesome thing for a person who's in grief to really experience, to actually be in that process of building something new and different and not having a bleeping clue about what it's going to look like.
Yeah, it's like a painting. Like you get an expressionistic painting or really kind of modern painting, and you just art therapy, and you're just maybe kind of doing very modern art, and you're just splashing it onto the canvas, and you're just feeling the emotion. That you might be angry, you might be sad, you might be frustrated, but if you put it into the art, it's very cathartic. You're running into people who are sculptors, painters, musicians, actors, method actors that get into the character, and they pull in what's like in and what's out, within and without, and like every day they do that performance, every day they show up on stage, like if they're doing a live play, like they're doing that character in a different way, based on however they felt it. but
Mhm.
they're still within the archetype of what the character is, but they're willing to give themselves the space to kind of grow the character. So
Yes.
when you can give yourself permission to be in that kind of now moment
Mhm.
and to
Yes.
actually have the vulnerability of being authentic, it's not staged.
Mhm.
It's raw, raw
Yeah.
element.
And can I say beautiful and beautiful because I think sometimes some of the most intense or treacherous, unwanted or unexpected events that happen in a human's life lead to some of the most beautiful, beautiful expressions. Right now, I'm thinking about Los Angeles.
Oh
You know,
yeah,
I'm thinking about Los Angeles and I'm thinking about all of the people that are coming together. I'm working with someone who's literally bringing her favorite surfboard to LA and donating it because she's got several, her very favorite one. She's donating. Like, how sweet is that? You know?
people with like tragic moments bring out like feelings. So people get
Mhm.
like it's either you get empathy or you get the opposite where you get get in the blame game. You get people instead of being empathetic, then they go say whatever. Well, that's
Exactly.
not very useful. It's like
Mhm.
people are hurting, and you throw you know throw like fire on it, like throw like gasoline on it. It's like okay, well that's not really helpful. But then you get the greater angels, like people like actually step up
Yes.
and get people that don't. That
Mhm.
we see in this time, we get to see the people stepping up, like give the surfboard, and other people saying,
Yes.
"Oh, let's not give you any money. Let's not give you any aid at all because it's your fault."
Yeah, so I don't look so I think that this is one of the things, like, I really, really do try to live into the tenets that I teach and believe in, and I really, try to just take my eyes off of the people that wanna make a situation worse, and I really look to the heroes, I look to the earth angels, I look to my own humanity. What emotions are coming up for me? And I will confess what actually made me cry were when they were loading all the pets onto an airplane. I don't know if you saw that. There were like over 100 pets that were rescued, and they were and some celebrities and regular folks out there were loading these pets onto a plane, and I can't remember which plane it was, donated their plane free of charge to bring the pets into safety
Oh
so that
wow,
they could be adopted. I was just like, oh my
yeah,
gosh, the little fur babies, they get me every time. I get it from my mama, and I just can't help it. I just can't help
yeah.
it.
Well,
uh,
just having the feeling, like not just for humanity, but for the wildlife. As I've seen, like the mountain
Yes,
lions
yes.
and the animals
Mhm.
need
Yeah,
help, and people moving the horses, and
yes. Or the
I know.
joy, I don't know so if you saw the clip with the gentleman who found his dog. He
Mm,
the joy, the relief, the love, so visceral. I mean, I could just feel it. Some woman found her sheep. I was like, wow, she had a flock of sheep and they survived. And it was so sweet. She called them warriors. She's like, you are warriors. And I was like, oh. So, yes, the human, of course, I care about people too. I don't want you to think I don't.
yeah,
But the animals,
yeah,
I am connected to the earth.
yeah.
Um, Sometimes I think I should shift my title to transformational shaman because
Mm,
really I do a lot of transformation and the work, and the more I know about shamanism and being a shaman and doing the earth work out in nature and whatnot, I'm like, that probably would work. I just have to find a shaman that's willing to say, yeah, you're a shaman. So
yeah. But it's
if
very
any are
important.
listening, let's
Yeah,
talk.
but like
So go
yeah,
ahead.
because it's real important. Because one of the things like a great poet said, like nature is the cathedral, and I find
Nature is the cathedral.
it's like you can go out. I live in New Hampshire. Go out to the pines, and I like
Mm,
to hike and mountain bike, and just like to get away from the noise. of the
Right.
modern world and just get out into the woods. And we go out there, and the deer, see bobcats and you see like,
Yes.
the
Mhm.
beavers, and you just see
All
all
the
these
things.
animals, like, the monarch butterflies. Like there was this section of the Merrimack River, and there's this little enclave, and suddenly I went this one time in this one summer. There's just all these monarch butterflies found this little spot, and there were tons of
Mhm.
them, and they were just like their place. And they're like, oh wow, I found a little secret place. And I
That's
just
so
stayed there for like a
cool.
half hour just watching them. It wasn't
Mhm.
planned, but I was like, wow, this is
That's
it
cool.
was like I didn't need to do anything else and look at my phone, to have to listen to a Walkman. It's just like just sit there and watch the monarch butterflies in their little sanctuary. And they're like,
Yes.
that felt so good. And it was not even planned
Mm,
or anything, but there's sometimes like nature gives you like that kind of nugget.
100%. 100%.
It's cool to be able to feel that, because we're in such a modern world. We get so distracted by all of our things. That sometimes we need to get
Yeah.
away from that.
Yep. I'm blessed to actually live in the woods myself. So we have deer and unfortunately a coyote too. I'm a little worried. I've been seeing the coyote around. My dog's only
Oh,
7 pounds. So I told my husband, we need to make sure the dog isn't a Scooby snack this winter.
yeah,
So,
coyotes.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, it's important to give yourself a space, to kind of decompress or just get away from the noise,
Yes.
to kind of get quiet all the devices, quiet all the input, because there's so much stuff hitting people. And I see like
Mhm,
young people saying, "Well, like they're getting overload. They're
mhm,
on their phone all day. They're kind of doom scrolling, too
yeah,
much stuff." And to the
mhm,
point where, like, I'm a child of the 70s. I didn't have all that. I would have time to go be within my thoughts, read a book all the way,
mhm,
listen to a record all the way through on vinyl. And
yeah,
now today, people are they can't even get through anything. Like songs are like less than 2 minutes.
mhm.
I grew up with songs that could be a whole album side.
Right,
And kids
right.
today, they can't get into an album. It's like, I can't listen to the whole album. It's like, well, it's like, if you don't listen to a whole album from an artist,
Then you
you
miss
don't
it.
know who they are. You're
Mhm,
only getting like the single is a very surface level example of who they are.
right.
And you are not getting any depth. So I worry about the people not getting the depth
Mhm,
of what they're ingesting, right?
right,
They're just getting like first 15 seconds, first 30 seconds, 2 minutes. They
right.
can't get into the commitment to actually dive into things. And so, what are
Yeah.
you processing?
Well, it's interesting because that speaks to the deep dive you were talking about earlier, where you've got to do that deep dive within yourself to like make meaning in the world, right? And I think musicians, artists, anyone really is a great mirror to who we are, what's going on with us. And I think when we get to know an artist, when we get to have a nice relationship with someone, we actually get to see ourselves as well. We see our own humanity, and it helps, I think, let us know a little bit more about who we are, what makes us tick, what's important. And I guess as a therapist, like that's really the juicy part of life for me is like self-awareness, growth, self-exploration. Like I just think it's so interesting to understand the many layers of a person, of yourself and others too. I love biographies and documentaries and all the
Yeah.
things, Um, I just think it makes the journey so interesting.
Well, I think some people get scared of depth, because depth means like potential vulnerability. It's not
Mhm,
always going to be like the best thing or the
mhm,
most, um, you know, something that's easily dealt with. Like, it's like if you got to go into the depth of something, you might get into something that's a little deeper, a little harder to
mhm.
handle.
Of
So if you're
course.
just surface level stuff, it's kind of like, how's the weather? What did your
Right.
sports team, like, versus having a deep conversation with your best friend about something that happened that's kind of, you talk 2, 3 hours about it
Mhm. A
versus like a
big
15-second,
loss.
like,
Yeah.
elevator pitch thing.
Yeah. Well, so I have some ideas around why people struggle with talking about grief and loss and death. I think that our culture doesn't do a very good job of educating people about that. From the very basics of what I'm trying to teach people about is their energy body and how you can't put energy out and you are eternal, and forget any of those narratives that go along with that. You can make meaning about that however you want. I'm just trying to give you the facts about who you actually are, and you can do your research and decide what you want to believe and what you don't want to believe about that. But when I was a teen, I actually was very drawn to near-death experience. I hadn't had a big loss in terms of no one close to me died really before the age of, I don't know. I did have actually a god sister who passed unexpectedly when I was like, I think in high school. And that was a big shock to all of us. I think she was only in her 30s. But I was intrigued by near-death experience, but I think it's because I'm an adoptee. So I was actually adopted as an infant, but I was in foster care in Massachusetts, blah, blah, blah. And when you grow up an adoptee, you sort of are looking for that anchor. It doesn't matter how your parents treat you, how that family was that you were adopted into. You still sort of feel like bobbing on the ocean without an anchor, And I sort of liked it because I feel like a lot of the successes I've had in my life in terms of being who I am and what I want to do, I felt like I didn't have a glass ceiling. I didn't have any kind of DNA that I knew about. I didn't have any culture. I didn't have stereotypes. I didn't have anything. I was just adopted.
So you had kind of clean slate, blank paper.
Clean slate.
Yeah. So you're not locked into it. Because if you're locked into like your family's DNA and your history, you might think, well, this is the way we have to go.
Exactly.
If you have an open, like a blank page.
I felt like I had a blank page. Yep. So, but I was drawn to near-death experience. And I think I sort of wanted, okay, if I can't have meaning making about who I am right now in terms of history, I want to know what happens later. I think maybe my brain went there. But anyways, near-death experience research back then, and I was brought up in a Protestant church, but I wanted to know outside of the religious context whether like this is a thing or not. And I was convinced after I did my research, oh yeah, we definitely go on to something else. And what we do here matters. Yeah. Just by listening to some near-death experiences, which was great. That was before I even finished high school. I was into all that, So why do I share this? People don't just inherently do that. I think more and more people are doing that now. They're seeking questions. They're trying to answer these questions or asking the questions, but we historically haven't done a good job of it. When I was in health class, no one talked about death and dying. Then they didn't talk to us about, how do you handle it when your grandparents pass? Like no one did that, right?
Yeah, they didn't talk about it. When I think about it, it's like, nobody wants to think about death and taxes.
Death and taxes, funding. Every year I go, okay, you always feel this way. You're fine. It's always fine. Okay, so I talk myself off the ledge every year. So I honestly don't know how the accountants do it, but that's a whole nother thing. So understanding that people just aren't used to talking about it. So a lot of my grief educator work is we talk about it. We talk about what it feels like to be grieving the death of your person. We talk about how other people don't know what the hell to say to you. We talk about how some people fall off the edge of the planet after your partner passes and you never hear from them again. We talk about how people put their foot in their mouth. We talk about the loneliness, the isolation, the feeling like your whole life was just torn apart and now I have to build from ground zero, right? Because one of the big things that happens is when you have a grief and someone passes like that, they don't want to be a downer to their friends. And they also feel pressure like they're supposed to be over it or something.
Yeah, everybody wants you to be over it because it's like uncomfortable. And I think people don't like discomfort.
No, it takes 2 years. 2 years of early grief. 2 years. 2 years.
Yeah. people don't probably want to wait that 2 years.
No, that's just
For
the
the people.
early part. That's just the early part. There's still more. If there's an early, there's a middle, there's an end, right? There's a late part. So yeah, it's
People don't
real.
like the
That's
down.
fine.
If you're like, I had cancer, and I had
Oh,
people when I was 27, and there
yeah,
were young people around me, friends I didn't expect. They just fell off. And then there were people around me that actually stepped up, and I would have never expected. And it's
yeah,
like there's some young people around me that couldn't handle
that's
the
correct.
mortality of it, right? The
Mhm,
idea that a 27-year-old could have something like that happen, because you don't want to think about that. So
mhm.
I felt like
100%.
they didn't want to deal with the mortality. Like they didn't want to feel like, whoa, that could happen. So they want to be
Yeah,
away from it.
yeah.
So I think maybe when people die, it's like the same thing. They don't want to be around that vibe. They say,
100%, 100%. And you had what we would call ambiguous grief, right? Like you didn't actually pass or have someone pass in that moment, but you lost a lot of things while you were going through treatment. You lost the idea of being a person who was cancer free and never had to worry about it, right? Because now you became a patient. You lost those relationships, right? All those. And so ambiguous loss is also a tricky one for people. And that's real grief too. That's real grief too. 100%.
I found it
I'm glad you
allowed
made
me
it
to kind
through.
of step out of my shell and do what I'm doing now. The
Mhm,
pre-cancer version of myself, I was like very fearful of public speaking, never
mhm.
wanted to be up front, and would have never started singing a song, wouldn't have never
Right.
stepped on stage with anything. So the post-cancer, I'd say, why should I be scared if I survived? What am I afraid of? So it
Awesome.
opened up this whole possibility of I end up living in Japan, end up going places and doing things. It opened up like, oh, like I broke through a wall. I broke through a glass ceiling I had put on myself, that because I was willing to say, well, I survived that. That's not a big deal. Let's go try this.
Which is wonderful. And that's the thing, right? On the other side of the grief, you're going to have a new life. It's going to be a different life. We don't know what it's going to be. And so I guess I see my role as just coming alongside people like that and helping them understand, what it is to be human and what they can tap into for their strengths to move forward. But thank you for sharing that with me. That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
But you mentioned before you have Elevate Counseling Services, and you're
That's
in
it.
Massachusetts, right?
Yes, we are Southeastern Massachusetts. Yeah.
So people can check that out,
Yeah.
look that up. And
hmm
we also were pointing out that we have your retreat, and that will be fully clickable. You don't have to remember that's a little
Yeah.
long, but that will be clickable in the podcast. We are at the end of our show today, but I want to
Right.
thank you for taking the time to talk to us on a Saturday afternoon. And it's always informative, the different perspectives people bring to the table when we have these long form interviews. And
Yeah.
I was just very, very happy to bring this kind of topic of energy healing for grief and how science and spirit unite. And you mentioned the science of it, and people can go check it out.
Mhm.
We mentioned about the spirit and the kind of
Yes.
spirituality
Joe
of it.
Dispenza's wonderful Becoming Supernaturals, a fabulous book. If you want to check that out, that would be a great read for you to really understand. And if you go to the Elevate Counseling website, you can get on my email list. I have my newsletter, Energy and Eternity. You can just ask to make sure you get on that list, and we'd be happy to do that for you.
I want to thank you and have a great rest of your Saturday. And thank you
Thank
for being a guest on
you.
the Family Electric Ghost podcast.
Thank you for having me. Be well, be blessed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.